I'm Dr. Natalie Beauchamp, and this is What the Heck, the podcast that dives into what the heck is going on in the world of health and well-being, explores how to optimize your mindset and your lifestyle, and shares practical tools so that you can achieve your fullest potential. Join me and a special guest each week as we discuss everything from biohacking to diet personalization to cutting-edge detox methods to setting and staying accountable to your goals. Ready to find out what the heck you can do to stay healthy, sharp, and at the top of your game? Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Dr. Natalie Beauchamp here. Welcome to the What the Heck podcast. Super excited today to have a good friend of mine, Dr. Julie McLaughlin. And Julie is from Chicago. So for our American friends listening, you'll be happy to see that I'm trying to get a variety of guests here from, hopefully all over the world at some point. So Julie and I are both chiropractor, and we also both do a podcast for women, empowering women in chiropractic. So this is how Julie and I met, and through several conversation and picking her brain on what's happening in the States and so forth, I asked Julie to come and be a guest on the show. And today we're going to talk about heart health, the fastest, easiest way to predict, prevent, and reverse heart disease. And Julie and I just had the discussion prior to getting on that because the American health system and the Canadian health system are so different, it's going to be fun because we can make comparison and discuss what's available in one country and, maybe not so much in the other country. So Julie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Natalie. I so appreciate you inviting me. And it's so nice to talk to both the Americans and the Canadian friends. My parents are Canadian. My grandparents are Canadian. So I'm the first generation in my family here in the United States. So this is an awesome audience for me. And I so appreciate this.
That's great. I didn't know you were from Canadian parents. So Julie, I always let my guests introduce themselves in terms of, tell us your story. How did you get, and I know you've been at this longer than I have, which is refreshing for me because lately I seem to be the most experienced person. So I don't know what it says about us, but tell us about you, how you got to where you're at, and what does your practice look like? And then we'll dig into some specific points about heart health.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always hate to admit this, but I've been practicing for 31 years and I am north of Chicago. And, I got into this many years ago because I really wanted to be able to help people without the use of drugs and surgery. I knew that there was a better way. And I have patients coming from all walks of life in my practice. We treat people with back pain, obviously, as a chiropractor. I'm also an acupuncturist, and I also am a functional medicine practitioner. And so with all of those things together, we have really good tools to correct the problem and really focus on what's causing the issue as opposed to treating the symptoms, which we know that's what we do. Yeah. And so I also teach physicians advanced lab markers and functional medicine. So my focus is really on the whole person and making that whole person better. And my specialty is the cardiometabolics for sure.
That's awesome. So I'm so glad we're going to be discussing this. So Julie, tell us why, knowing your numbers can change everything. And I know myself, I didn't have the extensive training as you do and the years of them, but I have a chapter in my book called Know Your Numbers. So let's dig into what are those numbers, because what hurts me often is that I have patients that go for their regular blood tests and it comes back and say, clean bill of health. And I go, ooh, it's not that simple. So let's dig into those markers.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you go to the doctor and you get a blood test done, they usually order something that's called a lipid panel. And that panel, I want you to know, is 50 years old. right? Now, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't measure my dog against something that's 50 years old, right? So that panel consists of a total cholesterol, and you want your total cholesterol to be below 200, LDL, and I always think of LDL as lousy, loser, bad cholesterol, and you want that to be below 100. The HDL, the happy, healthy cholesterol, that's the good cholesterol. For men, we want that in our functional range to be above 50. And for women, we want that to be above 60. And then they also measure something that's called a triglyceride, which is a fat plus a sugar. So I think of the triglycerides as sticky like gum. And that's what the cholesterol, like chicken fat, sticks to cause that buildup in the blood vessels. Now that's the 50-year-old panel. That's probably what you guys are getting tested up there in Canada, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, well, in November of 2018, so just a few months ago, the American Heart Association and the American Cholesterol Association, and I've been waiting for this for a long time because we've been doing these markers for close to 10 years now, have now mandated that part of that lipid panel needs to be tested as something that's called ApoB and LP little a. Now, it sounds like alphabet soup, right? It sounds kind of crazy.
It does.
So I will tell you a story that's the best way that people could understand what these markers do, because sometimes it gets so complicated and it's really hard for people to understand. And they just say, well, if my doctor says it's fine, it must be fine. But I really want people to be educated and know what their numbers are, because knowing your numbers is so important, because I say what gets measured gets managed. And if you know those numbers, you can really target in your lifestyle changes to change those specific numbers. So the LDL, the bad cholesterol, that's how many. But the other thing we want to know with that ApoB is how sticky is it? So if you don't have too many, but they're too sticky, you can still have a heart attack or stroke. And so then there's another marker, it's called SDLDL. I call it super dangerous LDL. And this is how I describe it. So I'm going to come to your house for dinner, and I'm a very, very bad house guest because I'm going to bring a bucket of rocks and a bucket of sand. I'm going to dump one on your carpet. Which one would you want me to dump, Natalie?
We'll take the rocks.
Right, exactly. Because it's easier to clean up, right? Yeah. So people who have the sand, think about that sand, visualize it like going through your carpet and the padding, that builds up the plaque. Now you have to get some workers to get the sand out of the carpet. So that's when you need enough of the HDL, the good cholesterol. That's who cleans up that sand. And so if you don't have enough workers to clean it up, there's one more marker. It's called APOA1, APOA1. So they're all these letters. And that tells us how strong those workers are or how lazy the workers are. So by knowing all those numbers, we can really dive in. Is your heart issue or your potential heart issue with the bad cholesterol, with the good cholesterol? Are there things you can do with exercise or diet? And you can really zero in on the specific thing that you need to do to change them.
Okay. So was that 2 markers or 3 markers that they mandated with
They
that
mandated
November?
2.
Okay.
2 markers. And the LP little a is more of a genetic marker. And with that one, on that show, The Biggest Loser, the coach who had that early onset heart attack, who was in super good shape, It was because of the LP little a marker, which is a genetic marker, and statins won't lower it. Nothing will really lower that marker other than niacin. Niacin will lower it. Okay. Niacin is really effective with cholesterol because it turns off that cholesterol production in the liver.
How can people get tested for that genetic marker? Would a test like 23andMe do it, or something more specific?
Yes, so it normally can be done here in the States, it can be done like at a regular lab.
Okay.
You can do that test. It's not like a specialty genetic test, especially now that that's mandated. So it would be part of a comprehensive lipid panel.
Okay, so it's still through blood draw.
Still through blood draw, yeah.
Okay, Cool. Awesome. So, okay. So I'm super excited to hear that those things have been mandated because, like you said, you've been doing them. But if people didn't know those things existed, especially with the panels that we have here. So tell us a little bit more as well with the lab range versus the functional range, because you've mentioned that. And I think it's a very important point, if you don't mind clarifying that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, when you get your blood test back and they have those ranges, you think, well, where'd those ranges come from? What they do is they take an average of all the blood they get, and they probably get people not as healthy as you in that range. People from hospitals and nursing homes, people who are sick are a lot of times, unfortunately, the people getting their labs done. A lot of people still aren't into the mode that we're trying to encourage them, do it for prevention and wellness. So when you're comparing yourself against a really sick standard, so let's say a patient comes in, and I've had a lot of patients come in and they say I have this symptom or that symptom, but my doctor said everything's fine on my labs. But when we look at a narrower range and we compare you against a healthier standard, we're going to find things that are maybe subclinical, that are just starting, then that's the best way to start to reverse them or prevent them. So for example, vitamin D is a great example of this. So a lot of the labs, they want your vitamin D above 20, right? That's crazy. I want your vitamin D between 60 and 80. We don't want it too high, but we don't want it 20, 30, 40, or even 50. We want it in that ideal range because we know then you're going to have the therapeutic benefits of that vitamin D.
Mm-hmm. A little bit of a quick, not disclaimer here, but we have to be careful with numbers because US versus Canadian are not in the same unit. So, take that with a grain of salt.
Yes, I forgot about that.
System you're in. I know it confuses me even because, taking my courses through the Institute of Functional Medicine, which is a US based company. I was like, okay, what's the translation here?
Right.
Thank you for explaining those lab numbers. So, Julie, what are specific tools that people need to address and prevent heart diseases? So, let's say you do those more extensive panels, and it's coming back that okay, maybe you're at a lower range or you're not in the range. What can people do to prevent disease? Because I know there's so much myth out there with the bad fats and the cholesterol and triglycerides. So how do you explain it, fairly quick to a patient and say, okay, what you've been taught might have been wrong. So let's revisit how you're eating, because we both know that sugar is probably the biggest culprit, right?
Right. Absolutely. You're 100% right on that. So in 1992 in the United States, they introduced this food pyramid, and it was no fat, which meant high sugar. And that is when our health problems just exploded here, right? And I'm sure you guys probably see a similar thing up there in Canada. Yeah. And so that really has caused a huge problem. And now when we look at the good fats in relationship to the cholesterol, we want a lot of good fats because those are really going to be heart protective. So things that are monounsaturated fats are really, really good for your cholesterol and your LDL, the bad cholesterol. So that would be things like almonds, avocados, olive oil, things that have ALA in it or alpha linoleic acid, like walnuts, chia seeds, flaxseed oil. Those are going to be things that are going to be really beneficial. If someone has high bad cholesterol, and we'll just talk about that basic panel because I know that's what you guys have access to. So let's say someone has high LDLs, and they wanted to take a fish oil. They want to take a really good quality fish oil, obviously, but taking the fish oil that's higher in the EPA versus the DHA is going to really help them drop their LDLs. Okay, so some of the fish oils we know are balanced between the two, but you can even take one that's solely EPA that would help us drop the LDLs. That's where that one targets. Now, if someone has a problem with the HDLs, the happy, healthy cholesterol, they don't have enough workers. We want them to have big, strong muscles. So that's how I think of it. They need to do exercise. So aerobic exercise will increase your HDLs. And, they say, according to the latest study, they say that the magic number is 30 minutes, 5 days a week with being in your target heart rate range. is going to help you increase your HDL cholesterol.
That's and all the time when I have guests, it seems like we go back to the basics with sleep, food, exercise. It's almost like I'm like, oh my God, we're sounding like a broken record, but it's going back to basic is so important, right?
Oh, it's so important. And the thing is, sometimes when we do these lifestyle things, they're hard to do. They are hard to do. But with having your labs done and knowing your numbers, you can then see your outcome.
Yeah.
Because you get it tested, you do these things and you get it retested and it changes.
Yeah. I like what you said. What gets measured gets managed. I say what gets measured gets done.
Yes.
Right? So making that decision to say, okay, here are my numbers, here how I can get them better. So yes, so our Canadian basic panel doesn't have too much. We do have access to some of the labs, but I think if anyone is listening to this and they're curious, it would be potentially to ask their family physician to get a more extensive panel. Or I know in the States, in Canada, naturopathic doctors have access to labs, so they're able to order more tests. I'll have to specifically look at what's available, but that's a great place to start to get your numbers. So, Julie, why do people struggle to make effective lifestyle changes? You hinted that they are hard, but why do you think that is? And what tips do you give your patients to start with?
Right. They are hard because if you don't have a measurement, if you don't have a gauge, right? So think about if you're driving in your car and you didn't have a gas gauge, you would constantly be running out of gas and you would have no idea, right? Or if you had a gas gauge in your car and the red light comes on and you put duct tape over it so you just didn't see it because it was annoying you, right?
Yeah.
That a lot of people do that too. So the number one thing is get your numbers measured. And so the people that would consider doing these advanced markers, maybe they look back in their family and the number one risk factor for heart is early onset heart attack, stroke, heart disease in your family. So if someone in your family, so for women, that would be under the age of 60, men under the age of 50 would be early onset. So if someone in your family has it, that's a reason that when you go to your doctor, say, listen, I know this is the number one heart health risk. I need to look further into this because I don't want to have a heart attack when I'm 60. I don't want to have a heart attack like everybody in my family did, right? So that would be one thing. The other thing is really commit. And I always say you just do 1% better. If you do 1% better every single day, that compounds. Pretty soon, over 1% better over 10 years, that's like 5 billion times better. So if you could say, I would say, avoid your kryptonite. So instead of saying, what should I eat? What should I do? What do I know that I'm doing right now that I shouldn't do? Right? Maybe it's drinking sodas. Soda is going to elevate the triglycerides and the sugars. So if you know that there's a habit right now that you're doing that doesn't serve your optimized best self, that's your kryptonite. Stay away from it and stop doing that. That would be the first place to start with that. And then once you get your labs measured and you make your plan, retest in 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever is right for you that you talk to your doctor about, and put them together. Because no one's going to come in and say, oh, my cholesterol feels much better today. I know it's down, right? You can't feel it. So you want to continue to measure it because then you will know your own numbers and you will know what your own genetic potential and tendencies are to what you need to do to change it. And then, if you can always reach out. Dr. Nathalie is a great coach and your book is great, has great tips. And like you said, all of these other lifestyle things that are great for sleep, they're great for stress reduction. They're also great for heart health.
So let's talk about, I always say kind of the elephant in the room with the bad fats. And what do you consider bad fats, Julie? Because a lot of people get told by their, traditional practitioner to cut the red meat completely, cut the fat completely. So what's your take on that? And then maybe segue into plant sterols and how they benefit heart health.
Right. So with the fats, so the bad fat, good fat, so it used to be that saturated fat was the enemy, right? So that would be even coconut oil, the beef, things like that. So now they found in the more current research is that they're neutral fats. They're not going to improve our cholesterol, but they're not going to reduce our cholesterol. So you want to have the healthy fats, those monounsaturated, the fish oils, and the ALAs. But the saturated, so there's different types of people that can tolerate fats better than others. Just like not every diet works for every person. Some people do really great on keto, and some people do on plant-based vegetarian.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that dials into your genetics. So if you have a high heart health, you definitely can have saturated fats. You don't want to go crazy on it, and everything's in moderation, right? But you also don't have to avoid it, like the plague, like some of these things are out there, because the fats are really going to be helpful, because at the end of the day, cholesterol is a hormone, and we need that for our brain, and the fat coats the nerves in our nervous system. We need those fats. If you're not having fat, you're having high sugar, and that's going to turn into diabetes, obesity, and that's going to fuel the heart disease.
Yeah. So, would you suggest, again, I thank you for saying that there's no one size fits all. I don't know how many times a day I say that. So it becomes important for people to dig and figure out what will work, and having those markers are great. So let's say, I'm tossing a kind of an example at you here. Somebody figures out that their LDL is high, their HDL is not good. What kind of diet, I hate to use that word, but meal plan will you suggest to a patient to help lower that? So give us examples.
So that's a great question. So the way that we look at this, and I'm going to tell you an easy way that people can try to figure this out. So think about all the animals in the world, right? What do tigers eat?
I don't know. Other animals?
Yeah, right. They're carnivores, right?
Yeah.
What about bears? What do bears eat?
They're more, I actually met a bear before. I ran fast, so I didn't see what he or she was eating. But more, berries and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, and so they're omnivores. They eat a little bit of both. And then deer, right? They're herbivores. So guess what? People are the same way. We have these genetic hardwiring in us. So people who tend to have a lot of heart disease in their family and Alzheimer's and dementia, they're linked on a marker called ApoE, right? And there's a 2, there's a 3, and there's a 4. And so the people that tend to have heart disease and heart disease in their family and Alzheimer's will have an ApoE4. So I recommend those patients eat more like a deer. And so they would have 60% complex carbohydrates and 40% protein and fat. Mm-hmm. Now, if you don't have a lot of these diseases in your family, if you're not tested, now the ApoE is tested through 23andMe. Mm-hmm. Right? So if you're middle of the road, you would be like an omnivore, like a bear. You would have balance between like 50% of your plate would be complex carbohydrates, meaning veggies and fruit. And then the other 50% would be protein and fat. And if you're a tiger, you're going to have everybody in your family has diabetes, right? So they are going to have that ApoE2, and they're going to do better on a keto type diet where their plate's 70% protein and fat and 30% complex carbohydrates. And then, so the person with the high LDL, they're going to want to take more of the fish oils that have the EPA in it to lower that. And the low HDL, they're going to want to increase their cardiac exercise, that 20 or 30 minutes, 5 days a week. That will help them get that balanced.
Geez, it's love the way that you're, synthesizing this. And I think that's something that I shared with you, but my mom's got Alzheimer, and obviously I had her tested, and myself included, and we didn't have the ApoE4 marker. So again, just to point out how lifestyle can have an effect on turning on the expression of genes. But I just love the way that you're simplifying it, because people are confused. It's very confusing out there with all the information, or people get the results and then they don't have any direction. Oh my God, Julie, we could keep on talking for forever here. So I think you've covered a lot of hacks for people. So this is this podcast is all about what the heck is going on. That's the name of the
I
podcast.
love
And
that.
I like to, to not push the envelope, but ask the questions that people don't even think to ask because they may not be aware of what is out there. So, Julie, if people want to work with you, and I know you said you have some good tools on your website, so tell us about your website. Tell us about that tool that you were talking about.
Yeah, so since Dr. Natalie was so nice to invite me for today, I developed just a little downloadable. It's one page for you, and it's called the Better Heart Blueprint. And if you go to my website, it's drjuliemclaughlin.com. So it's drjuliemclaughlin.com. And right at the top of the page, click on the link and you'll be able to download that Better Heart Blueprint if you weren't able to take notes or you wanted to look at something. So I have a 5-step to success for your heart. And on there, if you did want to contact me, I have a area where you can click, and because I do telemedicine with functional medicine as well, and I'm there and learn a little bit more about what we do. So, and then all my patients come in and they say, I want to know. They may call up and make an appointment. I want to know if I'm a tiger, bear, or deer.
You know what? We got to love analogies, right? And we've got to love visual. So that's awesome. So Julie, each podcast guest that I interview, I ask them about their favorite quote. And I think right up to now, every guest has talked about a quote I had never heard. So I'm curious to see what your quote is and why you have that as one of your favorite quotes.
So my favorite quote is from Buckminster Fuller, and it's, "You will never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you have to build a new model and make the existing model obsolete."
I haven't heard that one either. So this is so awesome. So thank you so much, Julie. For our listener, take Dr. Julie up for her offer to download that blueprint. We will put the link once the podcast is finished. So, Julie, thank you so much for jumping in, giving us and our listener and our viewers clarity on the good fats, the bad, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I will like on this one. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Awesome. So thank you for tuning in for this week's podcast, the What the Heck podcast. This was your host, Dr. Natalie Beauchamp, with Dr. Julie McLaughlin. I hope you took copious note because there was tons of good information. And I will see you next week for our next episode. I'm Dr. Natalie Beauchamp, and this is What the Heck, the podcast that dives into what the heck is going on in the world of health and well-being, explores how to optimize your mindset and your lifestyle, and shares practical tools so that you can achieve your fullest potential. Join me and a special guest each week as we discuss everything from biohacking to diet personalization to cutting-edge detox methods to setting and staying accountable to your goals. Ready to find out what the heck you can do to stay healthy, sharp, and at the top of your game? Let's get started. This has been a Wellness on the Go production.